Title: Humans Stride into the Galactic Empire. The Galactic expected fear, but they just yawned. The Galactic Concordance had spent centuries preparing for the day humanity would step beyond its own star system. Ever since their long-range sensors first picked up radio waves from a small blue planet in the Orion Arm, songs, speeches, static-filled dramas about love and war, the galaxy's ruling powers had watched, waited and worried. Human history, as reconstructed from intercepted broadcasts, painted a species of brilliant chaos. Inventors who split atoms and poets who wrote about rain, warriors who built empires and rebels who tore them down, all within the span of a few generations. Military analysts ran simulation after simulation. Every outcome ended the same way: blood, fire, and a new galactic war. So when the alert finally came, human vessel detected crossing the Zenthari expanse boundary, the high command of the Concordance sprang into action. Battle fleets powered up. Defense grids locked on. Diplomatic channels buzzed with encrypted panic. This was it. The moment they had feared for 200 years. But what drifted into monitored space was not a warship. It was not even armed. The Odyssey Dawn was a modest science frigate, barely larger than a freighter, its hull patched in places with mismatched plating and what looked suspiciously like household sealant. Its engines hummed softly, not with the aggressive whine of military-grade drives, but with the tired sigh of something that had traveled very far on very little fuel. On board, Captain Daniel Ruiz adjusted his slightly wrinkled uniform and rubbed his eyes. He hadn't slept well. The coffee dispenser had broken again. Beside him, Dr. Lena Brooks tapped at her console, her dark hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She was reviewing the latest translation algorithms. Still no response from the relay buoys, she said. Either they're broken or no one's listening. They're listening, Ruiz replied, glancing at the tactical display. A dozen blips had appeared on the edge of sensor range, fast, sleek, bristling with weapons. Just not in a friendly way. He opened a general broadcast channel, standard first contact protocol, per Earth Alliance Directive 7B. This is Captain Daniel Ruiz of the survey vessel Odyssey Dawn, representing the United Earth Coalition. We come in peace, requesting navigational assistance and updated star charts for this sector. Also, if anyone knows a good place to get fresh produce, we're running low on apples. The message went out in clean, simple English, then repeated in the three most common concordance trade languages, thanks to Brooks's painstaking work over the last 6 months. There was a long silence. Then, across 100 command decks, alien officers stared at their screens in disbelief. On the Concordance capital world of Velos, the High Council convened an emergency session. Grand Marshal Tavor slammed a 3-fingered fist on the obsidian table. This is a trick. No species enters galactic space without a show of force. They are testing us. But Elder Nalira, the oldest member of the council, tilted her head. Their ship carries no weapon signatures, no cloaked drones, no energy spikes. And they asked for apples. Back aboard the Odyssey Dawn, Ruiz stretched and yawned. Well, if they don't answer in 10 minutes, I say we take a nap. We've been running on caffeine and hope for 3 days. Brooks chuckled. You're going to give the galaxy a heart attack with your chill. Better that than another war, he said, leaning back in his chair. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The Concordance ships held position, engines idling, weapons charged but not fired. Finally, a response crackled over the comms, a formal, stiff transmission from the Velos Central Authority. It welcomed the humans to monitored space, requested identification verification, and demanded an explanation for their presence. Ruiz recorded a reply while Brooks double-checked the encryption keys. We're explorers, he said simply. Our planet just got warp drive working last year. We figured it was time to say hello. Also, our botanist, Maya, says if you've got any citrus trees out here, she'd trade you 3 crates of Earth strawberries. The message was relayed to the High Council. Silence fell over the chamber. Then slowly, Elder Nalira began to laugh, a soft wheezing sound that startled everyone. They are not conquerors, she said. They are tourists with a star map and snack rations. Still, protocol demanded caution. A delegation was dispatched, not warriors but observers. Kale Vorin, a junior diplomat with a reputation for patience and a mild allergy to stress, was assigned as the primary liaison. He boarded a shuttle with 2 data slates, a ceremonial robe he hated wearing, and a deep sense of dread. When he stepped onto the Odyssey Dawn, he expected tension, hidden weapons, coded threats. Instead, he was greeted by the smell of burnt toast and the sound of someone humming. Captain Ruiz shook his hand with a firm but friendly grip. Dr. Brooks offered him a mug of something warm and sweet-smelling. "It's chamomile with honey," she said. "You look like you need it." Kyle blinked. You are not preparing for conflict?" Ruiz shrugged. "Why would we? We just got here. We don't even know where the bathrooms are." Later, as Kale reviewed the ship's logs, mundane entries about engine maintenance, crew birthdays, and a failed attempt to grow tomatoes in zero gravity, he realized something unsettling. The humans weren't pretending to be harmless. They genuinely didn't see the galaxy as a battlefield. To them, space was just space. Big, empty, and full of interesting things to look at. When he reported back to Velos, his summary was met with skepticism. "They must be hiding something," insisted the Grand Marshal. But Elder Nalira simply smiled. "Or perhaps they have nothing to hide." And so, while the Concordance debated, the Odyssey Dawn drifted peacefully in orbit, its crew taking turns napping, sharing stories, and wondering if anyone out here had ever tried peanut butter. The galaxy had braced for monsters. Instead, it found people who yawned when they were tired, shared their food when they had extra, and asked polite questions about local customs. No one knew it yet, but the real revolution had already begun, not with a bang, but with a sleepy shrug and a request for directions. Title: Humans Stride into the Galactic Empire. The Galactic expected fear, but they just yawned. Part 2. Kale Voren had never felt so out of place in his entire diplomatic career. Assigned to the newly formed Human Liaison Office on Velos, he was expected to decode humanity, to fit them into the Concordance's rigid framework of species profiles, threat levels, and cultural taxonomies. But humans refused to cooperate. They didn't follow patterns. They didn't respond to protocol. And worst of all, they kept offering him snacks. His office, once a quiet chamber for analyzing treaty clauses, now smelled faintly of cinnamon and something called popcorn. Dr. Lena Brooks had brought a bag during her last visit, explaining it was movie night fuel. Kale had no idea what a movie was, but he ate the popcorn anyway. It was surprisingly good. Every morning he received new reports from human outposts, not military briefings or resource claims, just casual updates. Captain Daniel Ruiz had helped repair a malfunctioning water purifier on a mining colony using a bent spoon and some wire. A human engineer named Owen Patel had taught a group of Cathari technicians how to jury-rig a coolant leak with duct tape and optimism. None of it made strategic sense. Yet somehow things kept working better wherever humans showed up. The Concordance High Council remained uneasy. Grand Marshal Tavor insisted humanity was lulling them into complacency. No species achieves interstellar travel without ambition, he argued during a closed session. They are playing a long game. But Elder Nalira, now unofficially dubbed the Human Whisperer by younger aides, simply asked, "What if their game is just being helpful?" Meanwhile, on Velos, Dr. Brooks had started hosting weekly gatherings in the embassy's small garden. She called them coffee mornings. At first, only a few curious aides attended, then mid-level bureaucrats. Then, to everyone's shock, Ambassador Zarin of the Solvani Compact showed up, just to try the Earth Bean drink. Brooks served coffee in mismatched mugs, baked something she called banana bread, and asked people about their weekends. No agenda, no negotiations, just conversation. Within weeks, the event became the most talked-about social hour in the diplomatic quarter. Species that hadn't spoken in decades found themselves debating the best way to brew tea, or whether socks should have patterns. Kyle attended every week, though he never quite understood the appeal. He'd sit quietly sipping his coffee, too bitter at first, but he was starting to like it, and watch as tense officials relaxed, laughed, even shared personal stories. Once, a normally stoic Draxian attaché admitted he missed his childhood pet, a 6-legged lizard named Glip. Brooks handed him a cookie and said, "Glip sounds awesome." Back at his desk, Kale tried to categorize this behavior. Was it psychological manipulation? Soft power infiltration? But the humans never asked for anything in return. They didn't push trade deals or demand territory, they just existed openly and unapologetically. Things grew stranger when human cultural exports began circulating. A concordance data streamer accidentally uploaded an old Earth television show called The Office. Within days, it went viral. Aliens mimicked human phrases like "that's what she said" without understanding them, wore paper clips as fashion accessories, and held pretend meetings just for fun. The Cathari hegemony, known for their rigid ceremonial war oratory, invited human observers to a formal recital. Captain Ruiz attended out of politeness. Halfway through the thunderous hour-long chant about ancestral glory, he fell asleep. The incident caused a minor scandal. But instead of apologizing profusely, Ruiz simply said, "Sorry, I pulled double shift last night. Your poem was beautiful, though very loud." To everyone's surprise, the Cathari elders were not offended. One even chuckled. "No one has ever slept through the blood oath of Varnock and lived to tell about it," he said. Perhaps that is a sign of true peace. Kale documented everything, but his reports grew less analytical and more observational. "Humans do not seek dominance," he wrote one evening. "They seek connection. Even when they fail, they try again, often with baked goods." The real turning point came on Salon 7, a bustling trade hub where human contractors had been hired to upgrade the orbital regulator, a critical piece of infrastructure that kept the station's gravity stable. The previous alien engineers had declared the system beyond repair. Budget overruns, technical incompatibilities, bureaucratic delays. It was a mess. Then Owen Patel arrived with 2 assistants, a toolbox full of odd-shaped tools, and a cooler of sandwiches. Within 48 hours, the regulator was humming smoothly. Patel used spare parts from a decommissioned cargo loader, rewired the control panel with what looked like copper string, and sealed a leak with silver tape that read NASA in faded letters. Local technicians watched in awe. "How did you do that?" asked one. Patel shrugged. "Same way we fix everything back home. Try stuff till it works," word spread. Soon other stations requested human-style fixes, not because they were advanced, often they were laughably low-tech, but because they worked, fast and cheap. Human engineers became quietly famous for showing up, asking a few questions and solving problems while making terrible jokes. Back on Velos, Kale found himself defending humanity more than analyzing it. When a senior official accused humans of undermining galactic standards, Kyle replied, "They're not replacing standards. They're reminding us that things don't have to be complicated to be effective." Even Grand Marshal Tavor began to waver, after a human medic saved the life of a wounded concordance scout using a needle, some thread, and a lullaby. He admitted grudgingly that perhaps humans were not a threat, just profoundly, bafflingly different. Dr. Brooks, now a familiar face in the Capitol, started giving informal lectures on Earth culture. She explained holidays like Thanksgiving. It's about being thankful and also eating a lot. Sports like baseball. It's slow, but people love it. And the concept of weekends, what are 2 days where you don't work, just rest or do fun things. Alien students took furious notes. The idea of scheduled rest was revolutionary in a galaxy where productivity was measured in constant output. One young Xanthari cadet asked, "Do you ever feel guilty for not working?" Brooks smiled. "Sometimes. But then I take a nap, and it goes away." Kale watched her from the back of the room, sipping coffee from his now favorite mug, a chipped one with a cartoon cat on it. He realized something important. The galaxy had expected humans to bring weapons, demands, or ideology. Instead, they brought simplicity, kindness, a willingness to sit with strangers and share a meal without expecting anything in return. And in a society built on hierarchy, suspicion, and endless protocol, that was more disruptive than any warship. The Concordance didn't know how to classify humanity, but slowly, quietly, it was beginning to admire them, not for their strength, but for their ease, not for their power, but for their peace. And when Kale returned to his office that evening, he didn't write a report. He made himself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and just yawned. Title: Humans Stride into the Galactic Empire. The Galactic Expected Fear. But they just yawned. Part 3. Galeras Station hung in the quiet dark of Sector 9, a modest refueling outpost built on an old asteroid core. It was not important by galactic standards. No Grand Council met there. No rare minerals were mined. But it had become popular among freight haulers for one reason. The humans ran the place, and they sold the best chili dogs in 3 systems. Owen Patel managed the station with the same calm he used to fix broken machines. He kept the lights on, the air clean, and the snack bar stocked. His staff, a mix of humans and a few curious locals, worked easy shifts, laughed often, and never carried weapons. The station had no defenses. Why would it? No one attacked a place that served free coffee with every fuel refill. But the Draxian Dominion did not care about coffee. A splinter faction within the Dominion, led by Commander Vrak-Tor, saw humanity's growing influence as weakness. To them, peace was surrender, and Galera Station, unarmed and cheerful, was the perfect target to prove that humans were not to be trusted, only crushed. On a routine Tuesday morning, 3 Draxian raiders dropped out of warp just beyond the station's comms range. Their hulls were scarred from past battles, their weapon ports glowing hot. Vrak-Tor broadcast a single message: surrender control of Galera Station or be purged. Inside the main hub, Owen was arguing with his botanist about whether ketchup belonged on chili dogs. The alert pinged softly on his wristpad. He glanced at it, frowned, then sighed. Not again. He walked to the control console, sipped his lukewarm tea, and studied the sensor readout. 3 ships. Heavy armament. No hails, no negotiations. Just threats. His second in command, a young human named Ellie Cruz, stood beside him. Should we call for help? Owen shook his head. By the time Concordance peacekeepers get here, we'll either be dead or bored. Let's try something else. He tapped a few keys. Then, with a mischievous grin, he activated the station's public address system. Not an alarm. Not a distress call. He queued up an old Earth sitcom, Friends, Season 2, Episode 14, and set it to loop on all external and internal channels. The Draxians boarded, expecting resistance. Instead, they stepped into a corridor filled with the sound of canned laughter, and someone named Joey saying, "How you doing?" Confused, they moved deeper into the station. Lights flickered, not from damage, but because Owen had rerouted non-essential power to mimic a failing grid. Doors cycled slowly. Screens displayed error messages in cheerful fonts. In the mess hall, a pot of chili bubbled gently on the stove, and a sign read, "Help yourself, spoons in the drawer." Vrak-Tor stormed onto the command deck, plasma rifle raised. "Where are your warriors?" he roared. Owen sat in his chair, feet up on the console, watching a rerun on his personal screen. "We don't have any," he said without looking up. "You want a chili dog?" "They're fresh." The commander hesitated. This was not how invasions worked. There should be fear, panic, defiance, not snacks and sitcoms. Outside, the Draxian ships held position, unsure whether the station's odd behavior was a trap. Their sensors showed no energy spikes, no hidden weapons, no troop movements. Just life signs, calm, steady, and slightly sleepy. Back on Velos, Kael'Vorin received the emergency ping. His heart dropped. He expected news of bloodshed, of human arrogance finally meeting its match. But the live feed from Galeras showed something else entirely. Draxian soldiers wandering the halls, looking lost while cheerful Earth music played in the background. Captain Ruiz, now stationed nearby, arrived within the hour, not with weapons, but with a shuttle full of engineers and a cooler of sandwiches. He docked calmly, walked onto the station, and greeted the Draxians like confused tourists. "You guys lost?" he asked. Vrak-Tor, cornered by absurdity, finally lowered his weapon. "This is not honorable," he muttered. "Neither is attacking a snack bar," Ruiz replied gently. "But hey, mistakes happen. Want a coffee?" What followed was not a battle, but a very awkward conversation. The Draxians admitted they'd expected a fortress. Instead, they found a place where people napped after lunch and argued about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. One young Draxian soldier shyly asked if he could try a chili dog. Ellie handed him one with extra onions. By the time Concordance peacekeepers arrived, the situation was already resolved. The Draxian ships powered down. Vrak-Tor requested a private meeting with Owen, not to negotiate terms of surrender, but to ask how humans stayed so calm under threat. Owen thought about it. "We figure if someone's mad enough to shoot first, they're probably having a bad day. Best not to make it worse." The incident sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Draxian Dominion disavowed Vrak-Tor's actions, calling them unauthorized and unwise. But quietly, many within the Dominion began to question their own doctrine. If a species could face armed invasion with sitcoms and sandwiches and win without firing a shot, was strength really about weapons? On Galaris Station, life returned to normal. The chili dog line grew longer. Tourists came just to see the place where War went to nap. Owen fixed the flickering lights, restocked the ketchup, and added a new sign. All species welcome. Please wipe your boots. Back on Velos, Kyle wrote a new report. This time, he didn't try to explain humanity. He simply described what happened. No violence, no fear, just a strange kind of courage that looked like kindness. Elder Nalira read it and smiled. They didn't defeat the Draxians, she said to the council. They confused them into peace. Even Grand Marshal Tavor had nothing to say. For the first time, he wondered if the galaxy had been wrong about humans all along. Maybe they weren't hiding their weapons. Maybe they just didn't need them. And as news of Galaris spread, more and more aliens began to visit human outposts, not to spy, not to fight, but to see for themselves how a species could face the unknown with a yawn, a joke, and an open hand. The Draxian commander, Vraktor, never returned to his faction. He stayed on Galaris Station for 3 weeks, eating chili dogs, watching Earth shows, and learning how to make coffee. When he finally left, he took a recipe book with him, and a small, hopeful smile. The galaxy had expected fire. Instead, it got a warm meal and a second chance. Title: Humans stride into the Galactic Empire. The Galactic expected fear, but they just yawned. Part 4. The change did not come with fanfare or declarations. It seeped in slowly, like morning light through a window left open. Across the Galactic Concordance, old ways began to soften. Young diplomats wore Earth-style hoodies under their formal robes. Students traded human music files instead of war chants. In cafes on Velos, aliens debated whether weekends should be adopted galaxy-wide. No one could explain why it was happening, only that it felt right. Captain Daniel Ruiz, now promoted to ambassador-at-large, found himself less in war rooms and more in classrooms. The Concordance had agreed to a trial student exchange program, and Earth universities were suddenly the most requested destinations. Human campuses welcomed alien cadets with open arms, dorm room tours, and welcome packets that included snacks, a campus map, and a note that read, "Ask anyone for help. They'll probably say yes." The cadets arrived nervous, expecting rigid discipline and fierce competition. Instead, they found humans napping on lawns, arguing passionately about movies and forming study groups over pizza. One Silvani student, used to silent meditation before exams, nearly fainted when her human roommate blasted music while reviewing quantum physics. "Doesn't it distract you?" she asked. "Nah," the human replied. "It helps me focus." "Want some fries?" Academic performance soared, not because humans were smarter, but because they made learning feel human. Professors asked students how they were feeling. The exams came with breaks. Failure was treated not as shame, but as a step toward understanding. By the end of the first semester, alien students were sending messages home urging their governments to try the Earth way. Meanwhile, Dr. Lena Brooks published a paper that would quietly reshape galactic diplomacy. Titled "Yawning as a Universal De-Escalation Signal," it argued that shared tiredness, expressed through yawns, slow blinks, or relaxed posture, could lower tension between species more effectively than formal treaties. She cited data from dozens of first contact scenarios, peace talks, and even the Galaris Station incident. The paper was simple, backed by observation, not theory, and it spread like wildfire. Within months, the Galactic Diplomatic Academy added it to required reading. Trainees practiced calm presence drills. Mediators began scheduling talks in the afternoon, when natural fatigue made everyone less likely to shout. Elder Nalira, now an unofficial advisor to half the council, started every meeting with a cup of tea and a deep breath. "Let's all just settle in," she'd say. On infrastructure projects, humans continued to baffle and impress. A joint Concordance Earth team was assigned to rebuild a damaged transit hub in the Zenthari belt. The original plan called for 6 months, 3 oversight committees, and a budget that made accountants weep. The human lead engineer, a woman named Maya Flores, looked at the schematics, scratched her head, and said, "Why not do it in 3 weeks?" She used local scrap metal, repurposed old cargo drones as lifters, and organized work crews into rotating shifts with mandatory snack breaks. Music played during construction. Workers from 5 species shared meals and taught each other slang. The hub opened ahead of schedule, under budget, and with a small garden on the roof, Maya's idea. People work better when they can see green things, she explained. The Concordance's old guard grumbled. Grand Marshal Tavor still eyed humans with suspicion, though even he had to admit their projects never collapsed, their promises were kept, and their coffee was excellent. He once caught himself yawning during a budget meeting and immediately blamed it on human influence. Back on Earth, cultural exports kept flowing, not as propaganda, but as gifts. Cooking tutorials showed how to make soup that fixes bad days. Amateur astronomers live-streamed meteor showers with gentle commentary. A human conflict resolution podcast, hosted by a retired teacher named Carl Jenkins, became wildly popular. His advice was simple: listen first, talk second, and if you're too angry to talk, go for a walk. Alien leaders began quoting Carl in speeches. One Cathari warlord canceled a border dispute after listening to an episode titled, "Is This Really Worth It?" His aide later reported he had cried quietly into a bowl of human-style oatmeal. Kale Voren no longer tried to categorize humans. He simply lived among them. He drank coffee every morning, wore a hoodie on weekends, and had learned to bake banana bread. Badly, but with enthusiasm. He often visited Dr. Brooks in the embassy garden, where they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. "You know," he said one evening, "my people used to believe that strength meant control. That peace had to be enforced." Brooks nodded. "We used to think that too. Then we got tired. Real tired. And we realized yelling doesn't fix anything, but sharing a meal might." The shift was not total. Old fears lingered. Some factions still whispered that humans were too soft, too naive, but even they couldn't deny the results. Crime rates dropped near human outposts. Trade increased. Young aliens dreamed not of glory in battle, but of studying on Earth, eating chili dogs, or learning to play guitar. And when the Concordance proposed a new initiative, Galactic Wellness Week, featuring rest periods, shared meals, and optional naps, it was humans who quietly provided the templates, the recipes, and the gentle reminder that everyone deserves a break. No one declared a new era. No banners were raised. But something fundamental had changed. The galaxy was learning to breathe again. And as Kale walked back to his apartment that night, hands in his hoodie pockets, he passed a group of young diplomats laughing over a game of cards. One of them yawned. The others smiled and yawned back. It was small. It was simple. And it was everything. Title: Humans Stride into the Galactic Empire. The Galactic expected fear, but they just yawned. Kitten 5. The crisis came not with explosions, but with silence. For months, tensions had simmered between the Concordance's traditionalist warlords and the growing coalition of reformist worlds. Disputes over resource rights, ancient grudges, and clashing visions for the future had turned every council session into a shouting match. Grand Marshal Tavor stood with the old guard, demanding order through strength. Elder Nalira and her allies pushed for dialogue, compromise, and what they now called human-style patience. Neither side would yield. War seemed not just possible, it felt inevitable. Then Captain Daniel Ruiz made a suggestion no one expected. Why not hold a nap summit? The idea was met with stunned silence. A summit was serious, sacred. It involved formal seating, coded language, and hours of tense negotiation. Napping was undignified, but Ruiz was serious. "Everyone's exhausted," he said. "You've been arguing for months without sleep, without breaks. No wonder you can't agree. Let's just rest first, see if things look different after a good nap." To everyone's surprise, Elder Nalira agreed. Even Grand Marshal Tavor, after a long pause, gave a grudging nod. "If it fails, we return to protocol," he said. "But if it works, perhaps we have underestimated rest." The summit was held aboard the Green Haven, a repurposed orbital greenhouse once used for botanical research. Humans transformed it in 3 days. They hung soft hammocks between support beams, filled the air with the scent of lavender and warm bread, and piped in gentle sounds: rain, distant birds, the hum of a quiet earth forest. There were no podiums, no name tags, no assigned seats, just cozy corners, warm blankets, and unlimited herbal tea. Delegates arrived in full regalia, stiff and suspicious. But the moment they stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. The lighting was soft. The air was calm. A human volunteer named Ellie Cruz handed each guest a mug and a small pillow. "Pick a spot," she said with a smile. No rush. At first, no one slept. They sat upright, arms crossed, eyes sharp. But as the minutes passed, the quiet began to work on them. A Sylvani ambassador leaned back. A Cathari warlord loosened his ceremonial collar. One by one, eyelids grew heavy. The gentle music, the warmth, the absence of pressure. It was too much for beings who had not truly rested in years. They dozed off mid-argument. They dreamed of home, of childhood, of simpler times. When they woke, disoriented but calm, something had shifted. The anger felt distant, almost silly. Over shared bowls of soup and warm rolls, they began to talk, not as rivals but as tired beings who just wanted peace. By the second day, formal positions had softened. A Draxian delegate admitted his people feared being left behind in a changing galaxy. A Xanthari representative confessed her world was starving for clean water, not more weapons. Ruiz listened, nodded, and said, "We can help with that." No treaties were signed with grand flourishes. No oaths were sworn in thunderous voices. Instead, a simple framework emerged, written on a whiteboard in the corner, revised over cups of coffee, erased and rewritten with laughter. It included shared resource pools, joint infrastructure projects, and a new rule. All major decisions would require a mandatory rest period before final vote. On the third day, as sunlight filtered through the greenhouse panels, Elder Nalira stood and addressed the room, not from a podium but from her hammock. "We came here expecting to fight," she said softly. "Instead, we remembered how to be still, how to listen, how to care." Grand Marshal Tavor, who had not slept more than 4 hours a night in 20 years, sat quietly with a blanket around his shoulders. He looked older, gentler. "Perhaps strength," he said, "is not in never bending, but in knowing when to rest." When the delegates returned to their worlds, they carried more than agreements. They carried a new understanding, that peace was not won through force but nurtured through presence. That sometimes the bravest thing a being could do was close their eyes and trust the room. In the weeks that followed, the Concordance officially declared Human Appreciation Week. Celebrations erupted across the galaxy. Earth music played in public squares. Chili dogs were served at formal banquets. Children drew pictures of humans sharing coffee with aliens. The human embassy on Velos was flooded with gifts, hand-woven blankets, rare spices, poems written in a dozen languages. Dr. Lena Brooks read each one aloud during her coffee mornings, her voice warm with gratitude. When asked for a response, Captain Ruiz simply shrugged. "We didn't do anything special," he said. "We just showed up, tried to be kind, and remembered that everyone gets tired." And when the Concordance sent a formal request for more Earth coffee beans, the only reply was a cargo shipment labeled "For Friends" and a note that read, "More where this came from. P.S. Try the new oatmeal cookies." The Galactic Empire did not fall. It did not crumble or surrender. It evolved, quietly, gently, like a flower opening in the sun. And at the heart of that change was not a weapon, not a law, but a yawn shared between strangers who finally realized they were not so different after all. Somewhere, in a quiet corner of the galaxy, a young alien child asked her teacher, "Why were humans so scary before?" The teacher smiled. "They weren't. We just forgot how to be calm." And with that, the child yawned, curled up with a book about Earth gardens, and drifted off to sleep, safe, full, and at peace.